Okay, so this is our second video lecture, if you will, on Billy Budd. What we're going to look at is I'm trying to cover three chapters, 20, 21, and 22. All right, picking up where we left off last time. I urge you to read ahead, try to finish Billy Budd as soon as you can. We will be continuing with it next week. And maybe even for another 2 weeks. We're going to see how it goes. I want to be sure that everyone is comfortable with it before we move on to James Joyce. A reminder that tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, we're going to be having our Google Meet virtual classroom, if you will. And do try to make it. I know it can be difficult with our new situation to find the time and the scheduling. It is mainly going to give you an opportunity to interact with me directly. So by all means, bring your questions and your concerns regarding the text, and we'll have an opportunity to talk directly about it. The virtual classrooms, which we're going to be doing every week now, are to supplement these videos. Right? I will continue to post the videos so you can watch them when you have time. You can re-watch them. Remember as well to always come back to the PowerPoint, which is up on Omnivox. I will be posting more PowerPoints along the way, but it's really these videos that I think are going to be most helpful. And you'll be looking for more information regarding our upcoming midterm. As I told you, I'll be posting the questions for the midterm this week or early next week. At the latest, you will have 2 full weeks to write your essay responding to the prompts or the prompt that you'll be receiving. Okay? And we'll talk more about that. There'll be more information posted about that in terms of the formatting and so on. And again, with the in-class assignments, I'm still working, trying to figure out the best way to go about that. It'll be something along the lines that I will post a quiz of sorts, whether it's a grammar-related quiz or a quiz related to the texts we're reading. You'll have a 24 or 48-hour period of time to respond to them. I don't want you I don't want you to be anxious about the in-class quizzes or assignments. They will be, I think, geared towards simplicity. I'm more focused and concerned about the essays. Okay, and for the final exam essay, again, we have to wait and see if we're going to be going back to class. If we do, then we'll have an in-class essay that you'll write as was scheduled. If we don't, then it'll be along the same lines as your midterm. You'll have the questions at least 2 weeks before it's due, where you will send it to me in a Word document through Omnivox, like you'll be doing with the midterm. Okay? So on that note, let's go back to Billy Budd. So we're picking up right where we left off with the previous video. So if you haven't watched the previous video, you probably should before you watch this one. All right, we're at obviously a climax of the story, right, where things are really coming together. What we know has happened is the Claggart has made his accusation against Billy Budd, and I'm going to go through this as we've been doing in close reading, looking at specific things. I know the text is difficult. That's why we're going to spend a lot of time unpacking the specifics of the text. So what we have here is, remember that Billy Budd was summoned to meet with Captain Veer and Claggart and to face his accuser directly. And things we're going to note here, because right now a big part of the focus is on Captain Veer and how Captain Veer deals with this situation. Really, comes into we'll go back to that theme, right, between when we're talking about the individual versus society, okay, and how does one proceed. Remember the context we're in, the situation. This is a warship at a time of war, and this ship is representing the society versus the rights of man, the ship that Billy Budd came from, which was representing individuality. You know, big difference. And this is a constant theme, a constant conflict that really runs through this entire novella. All right. We're getting the idea, you know, where is Billy's head when he's being summoned here? Because remember, his innocence and his whole demeanor, as we've discussed at length. And we see right away the captain, I have always thought, looks kindly upon me. Wonder if he's going to make me a coxswain. I should like that. And maybe now he's going to ask the master at arms about me. Billy's coming in, again, in his usual naivete. He has no idea that any accusation has been laid against him. He's already, as you recall, somewhat dismissed Claggart and not concerned about Claggart anymore. And he's coming thinking he's going to get a promotion, thinking that may be the reason he's being summoned to see the captain. And he's always, his opinion of the captain has always looked kindly upon me. So when they all meet together, right, looking in the eye, briefly recap. Here we're having, I think, an interesting point where the captain is telling Claggart to confront the person he's accusing directly. And Claggart deliberately advanced upon a short range of Billy and mesmerically, looking him in the eye, briefly recapitulated the accusation. This idea of mesmerically, right? He's mesmerizing, or his gaze. Remember, we always talk, look at the eyes. Eyes are always important. It's also suggestive because we've talked a bit about the biblical references, again, talking about the innocence, the Garden of Eden, and how Billy has been referred to as an Adam before the fall. The mesmerically, to mesmerize something, it suggests with Claggart the eyes of the snake in the Garden of Eden, who mesmerized Eve and convinced her to eat from the forbidden tree. Not first did Billy take it in, right? So again, how's Billy going to respond to this? He stood like one impaled and gagged, the accuser's eyes removing not as yet from the blue dilated one, the accuser, of course, being Claggart. Claggart's eyes underwent a phenomenal change. Remember the eyes. Their wanton, rich violet color blurring into a muddy purple. Those lights of human intelligence losing human expression. Okay? Alien eyes. Okay? Of a certain uncatalogued creatures of the deep. Serpent fascination. Again, where is Claggart coming from? All right. And while we have in the story, Claggart is a man, he's a human, we constantly have these suggestions that he's demonic on some level, right? We don't know why he's out to get Billy. We grapple with the evidence available to us where we can speculate, but it's never clear. Right? Is he jealous of Billy's good look? There are some suggestions and implications suggesting even a homosexual desire for Billy, but we don't know. Okay, we have to draw on the evidence we have and try to extrapolate from that some kind of understanding of why this behavior on Claggart, this evil behavior, and of course that's part of what this passage is suggesting, is that it may be something beyond the human, in the same way that Billy, and especially the references to mythology and biblical characters, might be something beyond human as well. So we look at the literal. There's a man named Claggart, he's master of arms, and there's Billy. But then we also look at the figurative, what they represent, what they symbolize, perhaps. Okay? Not easy to unpack that in this story, but these are the suggestions that lead us there. Of course, when the accusation is made, Billy is shocked. Captain Veer, right, is trying to, speak up, man, speak, man, right? He said, add a little bit of this, speak, man. He's saying, but defend yourself. Address these accusations that are being leveled against you. We already know Captain Veer is not believing Claggart necessarily, right? Because he knows that Claggart is perhaps, well, he doesn't know, all right? But what we know here is that, again, Billy is unable to speak to defend himself. Why? Well, we know he stutters, right? Remember our discussions about his stuttering, how the suggestion that the narrator gives us early in the story is that the stutter it could be the devil's work, right? Again, bringing us beyond the human here. Dumb gesturing and gurgling in Billy, amazement at such accusations, convulsed, tongue-tied. He can't speak. It's such a shock what is he's being accused from, and of course his speech impediment, his stuttering, leaves him unable to respond, and this of course is a problem, and Captain Veer doesn't really understand exactly what that is when he first sees it. That's why he's urging him, speak, defend yourself. But then again, though at the time Captain Veer was quite ignorant of Billy's liability to vocal impediment, he now immediately divined it. Now he starts to understand, oh, he stutters. And it just explains here that he knew a stutterer in the past. But again, in this Billy's heart, quick prompted yet more violent efforts at utterance. He's trying to speak, and the more he tries, the more he can't. Efforts soon ending time in confirming the paralysis and bringing to his face an expression which was as a crucifixion to behold. Again, a biblical reference suggesting what perhaps this crucifixion is associated with Jesus. So now we're having even a suggestion of Billy being a Jesus figure, which we've had in the past as well. Okay, but Billy's frustration ultimately leads him to react as we were told he reacted, not quite so violently when he was on the previous ship, The Rights of Man, right? So whether the next incident, quick as a flame from a discharged cannon at night, his right arm shot out, Claggart dropped to the deck. Okay, the blow had taken full effect on his forehead, and he lay motionless. Yeah, he struck out, and well, as we know, he kills Claggart with one blow. Again, when we're looking at Billy, this pure innocence, this contradiction to that innocence, right? Where he then acts violently. We see this on a literal level, the frustration that he can't speak because of his stutter, and his natural reaction is to lash out because how else can he express himself? But then when we put it into that figurative world of pure innocence, the references to Adam, reference perhaps even to Jesus, and yet this act of violence. Captain Veer's response, faded boy. Okay, what have you done? What have you done? Faded. Interesting phrase. Faded suggesting what? Faded that he had no choice, that he was fated to do this. Just the story puts that out there again for us to start wondering, because we don't know why Claggart's doing this. It's as if Claggart is what the fated boy suggests, that Claggart's behavior was all to drive Billy to commit this high crime on this warship without explanation, as if fate has intervened, that there was no way that Billy was ever going to avoid what happened and what's going to happen. They move the body. Again, we see how Claggart It was like handling a dead snake. Okay, again, now we're looking, when we're reading this, and even with the dense and language that's being used by Melville here, we're looking for anything now that reminds us of things that we've already uncovered. The snake reference, the snake being associated with evil, the snake temptation in the Garden of Eden. So anytime we see a reference like that, we take note. Good material to use if you're writing an essay on this and making the argument that Claggart is a representation of evil. And we see this as, we see him referred to as a snake. Interesting here now again with Captain Vere. The father in him, in Captain Vere, manifested towards Billy thus far in the scene, was replaced by military disciplinarian. This is a key element, a key theme, this duality, right? Coming back again in its larger sense, this duality between the individual and society. Here we're seeing this expressed again in the character of Captain Vere. The father in him, right? Because as pretty much everyone who comes in contact with Billy, they like him. He's innocent. He's like a boy, baby Billy, right? So the father in him, manifested towards Billy thus far, is now replaced by the military disciplinarian. Remember, Captain Vere is the captain of this ship. That's a huge responsibility, and always keeping in mind the context, which is war and the recent mutinies. Okay? So keep that in mind. What he does is they put him up there. The captain summons the surgeon, right? We see that here. The surgeon entered to check and see, what is the state of Claggart. Claggart was unmistakably no living man he saw. The surgeon confirms Claggart is dead. Vere's response here now is unsettling for the surgeon, and a bit unsettling for us as well, I would argue, because here we see this extreme reaction. Suddenly catching the surgeon's arm convulsively, he exclaimed, pointing down to the body, "It is the divine judgment of Ananias. Look." The reference to Ananias is from the New Testament. Peter confronts Ananias for retaining money that belongs to the church, and Ananias immediately falls down dead. This is from the Bible, from the New Testament, Acts 5, I believe. Okay, you don't have to know the details of the reference. What you do need to register is it's another biblical reference. It's a biblical reference in a quote. Okay, so it's not the narrator making it this time, it's Captain Vere. Okay, but it tells us, remember, Captain Vere is a well-read man, an intellectual, and he is relating it to the Bible as opposed to, say, pure philosophy, because of his ability to have recognized this innocent nature in Billy and sees in Billy some kind of biblical biblical sense in him, if you will. Okay, I mean, it goes even further. Captain Vere, now again in motion, standing absorbed in thought, but again starting, he vehemently exclaimed, "Struck dead by an angel of God." Right? Claggart, struck dead by an angel of God. That's Billy. Yet the angel must hang. This conflict, this duality that we've been talking about, it's an angel of God, but the angel must hang. How is that reconcilable? That's one of the great dilemmas here, right? If Billy is representative of this pure innocence, but he just committed an act that is a hanging offense. He struck a superior officer and killed him. There is this is by law of martial law, as we're going to see explained. That's punishable by death. Interjection, mere incoherences to the listener as yet. We'll move on. Hold on. Again, I want to try to get through this and not make this too lengthy um, of a video. Um, what goes on here, what this is dealing with is Captain Veer decides to keep this quiet for now, right? Implying a desire for secrecy. This seemed unaccountably strange, right? Because why keep it secret? What is going on? What is Captain Veer thinking? How is Captain Veer going to resolve this or even deal with this? And what he tells him to do, go now, said Captain Veer, go now, I shall presently call a drumhead court. Now, a drumhead court it's basically an impromptu court martial. It's almost exclusively allowed at time of war when there is some criminal act on a ship that needs to be resolved immediately, usually because they're in the middle of a battle or a battle is imminent. It's an unusual position to take. He says, tell the lieutenants what has happened and charge them to keep the matter to themselves. It's the secrecy. But it's an unusual act because remember, they're separated from the fleet. Remember, we saw that in the last video when we were looking earlier. And something along these lines, the questions are, well, why call a drumhead court? Why don't we bring them back and have it resolved by the admirals, by a court martial, by the whole proper process, rather than an immediate need for resolution? Okay, and this is explained here when we get the misgivings of the surgeon Cameron. Was Captain Veer suddenly affected in his mind, or was it a transient excitement brought about by so strange and extraordinary happening? The thing to do, he thought, all right, and this is what we're probably meant to think as well, and it needs to be explained to us why this isn't done, was to place Billy Budd in confinement in a way dictated by usage and postpone further action in so extraordinary a case to such a time as they should rejoin the squadron, the fleet, and then refer it to the admiral. That would be seeming for the surgeon in any case, and one gets a sense for the narrator, the proper way to proceed here. And now we get this suggestion, all right, in relation to Captain Veer, coming from the surgeon and to some degree the narrator. Was Captain Veer unhinged? So it's an interesting way of looking at it because we've been asking the same question to some degree about Claggart. Is Claggart unhinged? Is he a madman? Is he, or is he a representation of full evil, of pure evil? But now we're looking at, in case we weren't picking up on ourselves, but we have this in this very small chapter 21, where the surgeon is quite shocked by the idea of calling a drumbeat court so quickly. Why the secrecy? And now starting to wonder, and it's putting into our minds as the readers, as the audience, this idea that maybe Captain Veer is unhinged. But of course, everything we've seen about Captain Veer up to now would suggest just the opposite. But this action has so jolted him, understandably. But we're seeing his behavior now being questioned by the surgeon. And the surgeon wonders what to do about it, but of course, bottom line is to resist what the captain is asking would be mutiny. And of course, in this context with the recent mutinies and so on, that's not something he's going to do. So he proceeds to contact the appropriate people as the captain had requested. We get here when we enter into chapter 22. So again, the idea, this suggestion of sanity and insanity, which we've encountered before, mainly with Claggart, is now being put forth to us in this context of now, as we're about to head into this court, into this trial. And again, it's showing the duality. We're looking at so many dualities here. Now we have sanity versus insanity. That applies to who? Well, we're not told that specifically, but it lends itself to the duality from individual to society, all these dualities um, conflicting with each other. And again, whether Captain Vere, as a surgeon professionally private surmise, was really the sudden victim of any degree of abrogation, one must determine for himself by such light as this narrative may afford. So here's our narrator telling us, whether Captain Vere is sane or insane or unhinged, the narrator's looking us in the eye, us, the audience, the readers, and say, that's for you to figure out. Right? We're not going to be told. It's going to remain a mystery, and it's a challenge to us, whether we're applying it to Captain Vere or whether we're applying to Claggart or even Billy. Again, what are we to make of this? And we must determine for ourselves, as based on what the narrative is going to tell us. Again, the context close on the heel of suppressed insurrections. All right, we have to understand that, and this is setting us up to try to understand the actions that Captain Vere is going to take here. All right, so we want to be thinking about this. Prudence and rigor, it lends itself again to the decisions that are about to be made. Circumstances attended the events aboard the Indomitable, and in the light of that martial code, okay, this is the martial law, the law of war, whereby it was formally to be judged innocence and guilt personified in Claggart and Budd in effect changed places. What's that telling us? Well, it started with Claggart making an accusation against Billy, okay, and where the guilt is personified, and the guilt, we know Billy was not guilty of anything, but now he is, okay, because the indisputable deed of the latter, navally regarded, constituted the most heinous of military crimes. Billy struck and killed a superior officer. The essential right and wrong, right? Again, another duality, which is going to become central now. How should Billy be treated given what happened? Keeping in mind, the captain and the people who are going to be sitting on the court, what are they to make of the accusations that Claggart made? Because Claggart never offered up any proof. It's even for us to wonder how he was going to convince Captain Vere. What was Claggart's overall plan? What kind of evidence was he going to produce that would substantiate his claim that Billy was part of an insurrection? And we're never told. All right, we're never told what Claggart's end game was. And Billy's killing him snuffs that out, and we never know. Interesting way that the narration is again not giving us answers, and again the emphasis on us having to navigate through this maze, if you will. Again, he deemed it advisable, the captain, in view of all circumstances, to guard as much as possible against publicity. The less the crew knows about what's going on at this point, the better, because, well, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which there's been a killing on the ship, and that's not necessarily going to go over well, but of course as well because it's Billy. And the captain knows that Billy has had quite an impact on the rest of the crew. So at least at this stage, while they jump into this drumhead court, things are kept quiet. Bit of like martial law, because the suggestion is that if we get it out there, there'll be too many questions. We need to keep this among the captain and the officers, who are the only ones in this society, right, the society of a military ship, who are really in a position to determine what is the best course of action. Talking about the captain and the officers, but a true military officer is one particular like a true monk. It's an interesting analogy, right? What does he mean by monk? there's religious connotations, but the other things we know about a monk, not with more of self-abnegation will the latter keep his vows of monastic obedience than the former his vows of allegiance to martial duty. A monk will secluded, will take certain vows and obedience to those vows, no matter what. Right? The monk is doing it for religious reasons. For this is his way of, or her way of worshiping their God. The comparison here is to Captain Veer, as a monk will always be obedient to his vows. Captain Veer will be obedient to the allegiance to martial duty. He had, again, duty. Okay, duty versus perhaps morality. You have a duty, you have to do it, you don't question it, even if you think it's immoral. That's the decision that Captain Veer has to make. And again, in this context, he feels he has to proceed as we see he will proceed. Feeling that unless quick action was taken on it, the deed of the foretopman, Billy, so soon as it should be known on the gun decks, where the rest of the sailors are, would tend to awaken any slumbering embers of the Nore among the crew. The Nore, okay, that's the mutiny, the recently put down mutiny. A sense of the urgency of the case overruled in Captain Veer every other consideration. I need to take care of this quick. I can't let the sailors spend too much time thinking about it, because it will awaken any slumbering embers of mutiny. It would be dangerous to my command and to the well-being of the ship. We must move quickly. This is how he's thinking, even though he knows, right? And we're going to see this, and as you've read, he knows Billy is least like, and he was the only witness. He knows Billy didn't do this in such a malicious way. It was almost a spontaneous act in response to being falsely accused, even though Veer doesn't know that the accusations are false, but there was no evidence to substantiate them. Okay? So he wants to turn the matter over to the summary court of his own officers. That's putting together the drumhead court. Accordingly, a drumhead court was summarily convened. He elected individuals composing it: the first lieutenant, the captain of the Marines, and the sailing master. Is he deviating from general custom, right? And associated with the officer of Marines, this is it's a little complex, and perhaps probably shouldn't go into it too much, because he brings an officer of the Marines into it, even though the Marines are not technically the sailors. But he does so because he feels that the people he's choosing for this court are the best of his officers to do so. Okay? So, Captain Veer, the sole witness. So the court is convened, the officers are there, and Captain Veer, concisely, he narrated all that led to the catastrophe, omitting nothing in Claggart's accusation, and deposing as to the manner in which the prisoner had received it. Billy Budd, the last man they would have suspected either of mutinous design, the last person they thought would be involved in a mutiny alleged by Claggart, or the undeniable deed of itself done. It doesn't make sense to them. All right, it is a very strange situation, and they're troubled by it, because they have the law. The law says you strike a superior officer, even if you don't kill him, it's a punishable offense, and it's punishable by death, especially if you kill him. Easy. But it's not, and that's what the story is getting at, that sometimes the decisions we make are not that easy, even though they would appear to be from an objective viewpoint. But they're not, because there are the people involved who are complex. Okay? When they ask Billy to respond to what Captain Veer has spoken, right? Captain Veer has spoken. Is it or is it not as Captain Veer says? And in response, Captain Veer tells the truth. It is just as Captain Veer says, but it is not as the Master of Arms said. What Captain Veer says, this is Billy speaking, is the truth. But what the Master of Arms, what Claggart said, is not. I have eaten the king's bread and I am true to the king. That is Billy's way of expressing, saying, I am loyal to the crown. I am loyal to my situation as being now on a ship of war. I would never do what Claggart accused me of doing. And of course, I believe you, my man. Right? It's hard not to believe Billy with his innocence. So they ask, as we've been asking, right? Why would he do this? Why would Claggart do this? No, there was no malice between us. I never bore malice against the Master of Arms. I am sorry that he is dead. I did not mean to kill him. Could I have used my tongue? I would not have struck him. But he foully lied to my face and in presence of my captain, and I had to say something, and I could only say it with a blow. God help me. Now, there it is, right? It perfectly explains what Billy's predicament was. He explains himself. He had no intention of killing, but he didn't know what else to do because it was such an outrageous accusation being leveled against him that he lost his cool, but he couldn't use his words. And we've seen this before when he had the incident on the rights of man, and this is how he responded. And again, following Billy's impassioned disclaimer. Next, okay. Following Billy's impassioned disclaimer of mutinous intent, Captain Veer's word, I believe you, my man. Next, it was asked of him if he knew it. Now, this is key, okay? Next, it was asked of him whether he knew of or suspected aught savoring of implicit trouble, meaning mutiny. Basically, they're asking him, did you hear of any plots on the ship that were suggesting that there were people on the ship, other sailors, who were considering engaging in an act of mutiny? Now, we know that Billy did. Remember when he was called out and tempted with the gold pieces set up by Claggart? Right? That was the moment that Billy was exposed to what was at least perceived, had to be perceived, as a insurrection of sort, a temptation to join some kind of mutinous behavior. Billy chose not to report it. Okay? So it starts previously with him not reporting, which he probably should have, but he doesn't want to be an informer, and and he's not quite sure what that was, but he knows it was something unsavory. But now he's being asked directly, were you exposed to anything of this nature, meaning mutiny? And his response, the reply lingered. He hesitates. Billy's mind, the interview with the afterguardsman in the forechains, right? That's where he was tempted with the gold. But an innate repugnance to playing a part at all approaching that of an informer against one's own shipmates. Okay? He cannot bring himself to do, even though it would be the truth. But because of this code that he is adhering to, where he does not want to be labeled a rat, an informer, he lies. When the answer came, it was a negative. Now, again, this is a challenge for us when we're trying to understand Billy Budd. On the one hand, pure innocence, an Adam figure from the Bible, a Jesus figure at times suggested, but he's also a liar here. So nothing is clear. Nothing is that simple. Okay? And it's an important one, and we're going to see this with Captain Veer as well. But with Billy, it's particularly interesting because there's so much. It's so overloaded with this idea of him being this innocent, naive, but at the same time, he's savvy enough to understand this code of informants and so on. And even in this situation, maybe it would have been, something that might have helped him, the sentence being more lenient. He doesn't even think about that in terms of that. He just, I will not be an informer against my own shipmates. I won't do it. So he lies. One question more, said the officer of the Marines, now the first speaking with a troubled earnestness. You tell us that the master-at-arms said against you was a lie. Now, why should he have so lied, so maliciously lied, since you declare there was no malice between you? Well, that's the question we're asking as well. All right, we don't have an answer to that, and we can't turn to Claggart anymore and get an answer. It's left dangling out there, much to our frustration and much to the frustration of the court. Why would Claggart lie about this? We know a bit more because we've had a narrator telling us more about Claggart. We see this. We're astute, critical readers, so we've seen these references to the serpent and to evil and so on. That is, perhaps he just has an innate maliciousness to him. But we don't know for sure because other possibilities have been suggested. And again, we have this touching on a spiritual sphere. Again, the figurative versus the literal. What are we dealing with here? Well, again, we're trying to unpack that. The question you put to him comes naturally enough, but how can he rightly answer anyone else unless it indeed it be he who lies within there? In other words, right, what Captain Veer is saying here is Billy can't answer that question because he doesn't know. And the only person who knows why Claggart falsely accused him is Claggart. And he's dead. So it becomes now, it's not the issue anymore. We've moved now, that whole Claggart-Billy confrontation now takes a back seat because the issue here now is what Billy did. The martial court must needs in the present case confine, limit its attention to the blows consequent. We're not here in this court to try to figure out why Claggart accused Billy falsely. That's not the issue. That's not what this court case is about. It's only about the blows consequence. And the blows consequence was the death of Claggart. This utterance, the full significance of which was not at all likely that Billy took in, nevertheless caused him to turn a wistful, interrogative look towards the speaker, a look in its dumb expressiveness, not unlike that which a dog of generous breed might turn upon his master, seeking in his face some elucidation of a previous gesture ambiguous to the canine intelligence. I quoted that whole passage because it's really beautifully written, but it's very important as well. The full significance of which Billy was not going to get. Billy's not completely understanding what this up here is saying. All right, and he now, in his innocence, he's now being compared to a dog that doesn't know better. And turn upon his master, Captain Veer. He's lost at this point. He's not fully, seemingly not fully grasping the situation. The situation is, it doesn't matter what Claggart did. And it doesn't matter, Billy, what your intentions were. All that matters is the blow's consequence. Nor was the same utterance without marked effect upon the three officers, more especially the soldier. Couched in, it seemed to them, a meaning unanticipated involving a prejudgment on the speaker's part. It served to augment a mental disturbance previously evident enough. Again, what this is suggesting to us is that the officers in the court, when they look at Captain Veer, who is saying nothing matters except the fact that Billy hit Claggart, their reaction is, well, wait a minute. Other things do matter here. Intention does matter. The circumstances do matter. Isn't this something that needs to have uh, more discussion? Shouldn't we try to investigate a bit more? Because look where we're going with this. And this doesn't seem to them to be fair, and they're questioning um, this mental disturbance that they see that might be in Veer, as perhaps we are as well at this point. But Veer, and we're going to have to see how he responds to this. Nobody is present, none of the ship's company, who might shed lateral light, if any, is to be had upon what remains mysterious in this matter. It's a mystery. Okay, so let's look at this again. I want to be sure this is clear. The soldier once more spoke in a tone of suggestive dubiety, addressing at once his associates and cabinet. Nobody is present, none of the ship's company, who might shed lateral light, if any, is to be had upon what remains mysterious in this matter. What the soldier is saying, he's one of the judges, is there's nobody here who can maybe shed more light on this mystery as to why this happened. And the suggestion is that we can't proceed unless we have more information. My God, there's a man's life at stake here. And Captain Veer's response, that is thoughtfully put. I see your drift. I understand what you're trying to say. Aye, there is a mystery. But to use scriptural phrase, it is a mystery of iniquity, a matter for psychological theologians to discuss. But what a military court to do? What has a military court to do with it? Okay, separation of the individual, where we get into psychology and theology and we try to understand the actions, versus a military situation, a military that is representative of society at war, during wartime. Not to add that any of his possible investigation of it is cut off by the lasting tongue tie of him in yonder. And the only one who's really going to reveal the mystery is dead Claggart. The prisoner's deed, with that alone, we have to do. So we're seeing Veer making his case here. The other judges are saying, well, we need more information. There's too much here we don't understand. And after all, it's Billy. We need... Captain Veer now is going to make his argument as to why ultimately that doesn't matter. And he continues to do so. And then, Bud, if you have aught further to say, he says, say it now. And here, upon this, the young sailor turned another quick glance towards Captain Veer. Then, as taking a hint from that aspect, a hint confirming his own instinct that silence was now best, replied to the lieutenant, I have said all, sir. Billy's not going to try to defend himself. Billy's not going to start saying, well, wait a minute, you have to find out more. Billy seems to understand what Captain Veer is saying. He has nothing more to say. There's nothing more I can say because I don't know. Coupled with his innocence, naivete, and clear, not fully understanding, I would argue at this point, his full predicament. But the court's silence continuing, broken only by Mona's consolidating in a low earnest, this seemed to arm him and energize him. Turning, he to and fro paced the cabin athwart, in the returning ascent toward windward, climbing the slant deck in the ship's lee roll without knowing it, symbolizing thus in his action a mind resolute to surmount difficulties, even if against primitive instincts strong as the wind and sea. Okay, difficult passage. I chose to look at this again to help us unpack when we encounter these difficult passages. All right, he's pacing back and fro. All right, returning, okay, on the deck and so on, without knowing it, symbolizing, thus in his actions, a mind resolute, a mind determined to surmount difficulties, even if against primitive instincts. The primitive instincts being as strong as the wind and the sea. The primitive instincts are related to morality, ethics, curiosity. There's a mystery here, and the primitive instincts are wanting to know the answers to that. But Captain Veer, recognizing that, is battling is in a battle with the primitive instincts versus the military reality and his position and his duty within this particular context. When speaking, did something both in the substance of what he said and the manner of saying it showed the influence of unshared studies, modifying and tempering the practical training of an active career. Okay, this is his philosophy coming in. He's up on the deck, pacing back and forth. And now when he's going to speak, this is what he's going to say, having to come to a decision based on these unshared studies. He's the only one. Remember, we had that. He's bookish, and tempering the practical training of an active career. Another would frankly concede that His Majesty's Navy mustered no more efficient officer of the grade than Starry Veer. Okay, he is good at his job. This is where the trouble, where some of the others are having, like, has he lost his mind? But he has to navigate through this. What to do under these circumstances? His duty, his obligation as a captain at this time, in this context, versus his humanity. Knowing that there's more to this story and that Billy Budd was not intentionally doing anything to kill Claggart, and it was a natural reaction. You go back to Billy's statement that I couldn't find words and I could only express myself in one way. I certainly didn't mean to kill him. By God, I only hit him once. The clash of military duty with moral scruple. Okay, there it is. Case all this coming up to here is coming to this point. This clash of military duty with moral scruples. All right, compassion. For the compassion, how can I otherwise than share it? I get it, he's saying, right? He's talking here. I understand where you're all coming from, and I share the compassion. Okay, I'm with you. I get it. But it is a case practical and under martial law practically to be dealt with. Okay, forget the moral scruples. I have to be pragmatic and practical. Follow the rule of law here. We are bound to regard the death of the master at arms as the prisoner's deed. Then does that deed constitute a capital crime whereof the penalty is a mortal one? Right? The master at arms, Claggart, was killed by the prisoner, Billy, and is that not a capital crime? Is that a crime that we know the sentence is death? Nothing but the prisoner's overt act is to be considered. All the other evidence that surrounds this, and there's a lot, is not to be considered. We have a straightforward insubordination, struck a superior officer and killed him. That's all we're looking at. And he talks about, again, when he's talking about the moral scruples as being part of our nature, right? Our natural inclination to want to know more and to be fair. And look at all the evidence. It is nature, but do these buttons that we wear as military men attest that our allegiance is to nature? Human nature? Compassion? Moral scruples? No. Our allegiance is to the king, not to what constitutes what makes us as individuals, our our ability for compassion and ethics and morality. No, which is nature, which with a capital N, human nature. No, forget that. Our allegiance is to the king, the individual versus the society in a time of war, to the king, who is our commander in chief. We are at war. That's all that is to be considered. So little is that true that in receiving our commissions, we, in the most important regard, cease to be natural free agents. They cease to be natural free agents once they received their commissions as military officers. No natural free agents. No humanity, it could be argued perhaps. Because what do we mean by our natural free ability to be compassionate? No, we have to throw that aside. Martial law, for that law and the rigor of it, we are not responsible. Our avowed responsibility is in this, that however piteously that law may operate, we nevertheless adhere to it and administer it. This is Veer's. Remember, Veer's talking to the other officers who constitute this this court, and he's making his case as to why they should convict and not defer. But the exceptional in the matter moves the hearts within you. He recognizes, I get it. Even so, too, is mine moved. Yes, my heart is here, as I understand your hearts are not comfortable with this. But let not warm hearts betray heads that should be cool. Ashore in a criminal case, will an upright judge allow himself off the bench to be waylaid by some tender kinswoman of the accused seeking to touch him with her tearful plea? Well, the heart here denotes the feminine in man, is at that piteous woman, and hard though it be, she must here be ruled out. If we weren't on a military ship, if we were back in England or wherever, and we would have witnesses that would come and plead their case that Billy's not a bad guy, and that might change the level of punishment and all of that. He understands that. Vera's saying, I get it. I know you're all thinking that. As we, as readers, are thinking that as well. But he's making his case. We don't have that luxury. Not in this situation. And it's very important that this is coming from Veer, who we have learned up to now is seemingly, while a bit of a loner, he's highly educated, and we were told earlier in the story, he exhibited elements of understanding and compassion. And he's admitting it here. I know what you're all feeling. I feel it too. But something in your aspect seems to urge that it is not solely the heart that moves in you, but also the conscience, the private conscience, right? He's saying, okay, it's not just your heart, but it's your conscience. You feel like, oh my God, am I doing something wrong? But tell me whether or not occupying the position we do, private conscience should not yield to that imperial one formulated in the code under which alone we officially proceed. I recognize your heart and your concerns about this, and your conscience is troubling you, and your heart is telling you we can't proceed with this. I feel the same way, but your heart, your nature, your conscience must be subordinated to the code under which we officially, which alone we officially proceed. To steady us a bit, let us recur to the facts. Now he's going to get utterly practical. In wartime at sea, a man of war's man strikes a superior in grade, and the blow kills. Apart from its effect, the blow itself is, according to the Articles of War, a capital crime. Even if he didn't kill Claggart, just striking a superior officer is punishable by death, according to okay, the rules of engagement of war. But surely Bud purposed neither mutiny nor homicide, right? I, sir, emotionally broke in the officer of the Marines. In one sense it was, but surely Billy's purpose was not to mutiny and was not to kill. Vere's response, surely not, my good man. And before a court less arbitrary and more merciful than a martial one, right? This is a martial court, a court of wartime, not a regular court. Then a martial one, that plea would largely extenuate. But we proceed under the law of the Mutiny Act. Remember all those details about the mutinies. That was to lay the foundation and develop the context in which this story takes place. The Mutiny Act in a time of war. War looks but to the frontage, the appearance, and the Mutiny Act, war's child, takes after the father. Bud's intent or non-intent is nothing to the purpose. Intention has nothing to do with this. We look at the facts. The facts is he struck a superior officer. He killed the superior officer. Therefore, and then we get one of the junior lieutenant here. Can we not convict and yet mitigate the penalty? All right, this asked the junior lieutenant. All right, so they're looking for a way, right? They're making their case against the captain. Okay, let's convict him. He did what he did. I understand. You've made your argument, Captain Vere. But can't we mitigate? Can't we change the penalty? I.e., do we have to execute Billy? Can't we just put him in prison? Come on, these circumstances. And then Vere's response, the people, meaning the ship's company, the sailors, have native sense. Most of them are familiar with our naval usage and traditions. And how would they take it? How would they take it if we didn't follow the law and execute for this crime? They, long molded by arbitrary discipline, have not that kind of intelligent responsiveness that might qualify them to comprehend and discriminate. They're not going to have the ability to understand why, in this particular circumstance, we didn't follow the rule of law. And they're going to go, what's going on here? You know what sailors are. Will they not revert to the recent outbreak at the Nore? Okay, that's again the mutiny. They would think that we flinch, that we are afraid of them, afraid of practicing a lawful rigor singularly demanded at this juncture, lest it should provoke new troubles. His argument is if we can't change the penalty. If we find him guilty, then there is only one penalty. We can't change that because that'll be perceived as weakness by the sailors. And that puts us at jeopardy. Okay, he's making an utterly practical and logical, from a military perspective, argument. Okay? Provoke new troubles. How deadly to discipline. Duty and the law. Duty and the law. I feel as you do for this unfortunate boy, Billy. But did he know our hearts? I take him to be of that generous nature that he would feel even for us, on whom in this military necessity so heavy in compulsion is laid. He's making the argument here that Billy will understand, seemingly. Interesting take. This main thing is, again, is Captain Vere justifying the actions that he's taking. Les came home to them, and then his closing appeal to their instinct as sea officers in the forethought he threw out as to the practical consequences to discipline, considering the unconfirmed tone of the fleet at the time of mutiny and war. Should a man of war's man's violent killing at sea of a superior in grade be allowed to pass for aught else than a capital crime demanding prompt infliction of that penalty? We are at war. We are at a time we've had these recent mutinies. We can't change the rules. We have to show that we will follow the rules no matter what, even though it goes against our nature, our conscience, our hearts, our humanity, perhaps. Again, the conflict between the individual and society, with Captain Veer being the representative of this particular societal reality of a ship at a warship on the high seas during conflict. So we get to this ending here. Says a writer from who. Hold on. That few know. I may come back to this actually next time, because we really should wrap it up. There's actually quite a bit to say here. But it's an interesting statement. 40 years after a battle, it is easy for a non-combatant to reason about how it ought to have been fought. It is another thing personally and under fire to direct the fighting while involved in the obscuring smoke of it. Much so with respect to other emergencies involving considerations both practical and moral. And when it is imperative promptly to act, the greater the fog, the more it imperils the steamer, and speed is put on though at the hazard of running somebody down. Little ween the snug card players in the cabin of the responsibilities of the sleepless man on the bridge. It's basically, and I'm gonna come back to it because I know this has gone much longer than I anticipated. So I'll wrap it up. But we're gonna come back to that. We'll come back to that. We'll talk about it tomorrow, actually, if you like. In brief, though, Billy was formally convicted and sentenced to be hung at the yardarm in the early morning watch. This passage here that I highlighted, just to give you a little taste, and then we can again discuss it tomorrow, is basically saying easy for us to judge Captain Veer and his decision here. But, you know, we're judging it from distance and after the fact. We're not there at the moment that it's happening. And it was a call that was made. And the decision is, as it says here, was formally convicted and sentenced to be hung at the yardarm early morning watch the next morning. Okay. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. Hopefully you have a chance to look at this. If you don't, you'll be able to look at it afterwards. Again, something we'll discuss tomorrow. We're obviously going to have at least one more video on Billy Budd. We have plenty of time to get through this. I'm not going to move on to James Joyce until I feel that you're all getting a good chunk of this. Okay? It's very different doing it this way than if we were in class. Okay? Look over the PowerPoint again. Look at the first video. Look at this video. Try to make it tomorrow for 10 o'clock where we'll discuss this. And I'm going to be sending you more information. We can, if you have specific concerns, send me something through Omnivox, an email through Omnivox. We can even set up a one-to-one, you know, or small groups, however we want to arrange it, through this video conferencing. Okay? So we have a lot of options, and we're exploring them. And God knows it's new to me. I am so technologically uninclined. But I'm learning. And want to continue to learn and explore these new ways of teaching. In any case, everyone be safe. Remember to cut and paste the link into your browser to hook up with the Google Meet tomorrow, and we'll take it from there. And we'll see your feedback again. Please remember, give me feedback so I can modify things and make sure that that you guys have the best experience we can get under the circumstances. Okay, then. See you tomorrow.